The lawyer's office smelled like expensive leather and betrayal. Natasha sat perfectly still in the mahogany chair, her hands folded in her lap, watching her husband of 7 years sign away their marriage with a flourish that made her stomach turn. Brandon didn't just sign the divorce papers. He performed it, like he was autographing something valuable, that smug smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You know, Natasha," Brandon said, not even looking up from the documents, "this is really for the best. For both of us." The lawyer, an older woman named Patricia Harrison, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Even she seemed disturbed by Brandon's tone, and she'd probably seen hundreds of divorces. "I mean, let's be honest here," Brandon continued, finally meeting Natasha's eyes with that condescending look she'd grown to hate over the past year. "You've been dead weight for too long. I need a partner who matches my ambition, who brings something to the table. Veronica understands that. She's got her own career, her own money, her own life." Natasha felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd practiced this moment in her head 1,000 times over the past 3 months, ever since she'd caught Brandon texting Veronica those disgusting messages. She'd known then that their marriage was over, but she'd waited. She'd planned. She'd prepared. "Veronica owns her own boutique," Brandon said, leaning back in his chair like he was king of the world. "She's got clients, connections, ambition. She doesn't just sit at home pretending to write articles that nobody reads." Patricia cleared her throat. "Mr. Mitchell, perhaps we should just focus on finalizing the paperwork." No, let me finish," Brandon interrupted, holding up his hand. "Natasha needs to hear this. Maybe it'll motivate her to actually do something with her life." He turned back to Natasha, his eyes cold. 7 years, and what do you have to show for it? A couple of blog posts? Some freelance articles for $50 here and there? You've been living off my salary, my benefits, my hard work. And you know what? I'm done carrying you." Natasha watched him, really looked at him, and wondered how she'd ever loved this man. His brown hair was styled too perfectly, his suit was too expensive for someone who constantly complained about money, and his face, God, his face, was twisted with such superiority that it made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. "I've set aside $2,000 for you," Brandon said, sliding a check across the table. "That should give you a few months to figure things out. Find a real job, maybe. Learn some skills. I'm being generous here, considering you brought nothing into this marriage and you're leaving with nothing." Patricia looked at Natasha with something like pity, which made everything worse. The lawyer probably saw Natasha as another woman discarded, another housewife left with nothing, another victim of a midlife crisis and a younger mistress. If only she knew. "Do you have anything to say?" Brandon asked, his eyebrows raised. "Any questions about the settlement?" Natasha picked up the pen. Her hand was steady, her mind was clear. She'd read through the divorce papers a dozen times already. Brandon's lawyer had been sloppy, arrogant, just like Brandon. They'd assumed she had no assets, no income, nothing to fight for. They'd given her the bare minimum, and Brandon thought he was being charitable. She signed her name on every line that required her signature. Natasha Williams? No, not Williams anymore. Just Natasha Reed. Her maiden name. Her real name. The name on her bank accounts, her investment portfolios, her employment contracts. "That's it?" Brandon asked, sounding almost disappointed. "No tears? No begging?" Natasha stood up, smoothing down her simple black dress, a dress Brandon had once called frumpy and cheap. She picked up her purse, a worn leather bag he'd mocked countless times for not being designer. "No," she said simply. It was the first word she'd spoken since entering the office 30 minutes ago. Brandon laughed, shaking his head. "Pathetic. You know, Veronica warned me you'd be like this. Passive. She said women like you never fight for anything because you know you don't deserve it." Natasha met his eyes one last time. She saw his expensive watch, his designer suit, his smug face. She thought about their apartment, the one he thought he was paying for alone, the one where he'd brought Veronica while Natasha was supposedly at the library writing. She thought about the joint account he'd drained last month, thinking it was his money. It had been, she'd never put her real income in any shared account. "Goodbye, Brandon," she said quietly. "Yeah, good luck out there," he called after her as she walked toward the door. "You're going to need it. Women like you always do. No skills, no money, no prospects. Should have tried harder to keep me happy." Patricia started to say something, probably something professional about paperwork and court dates, but Natasha was already leaving. She walked through the glass doors of the law office, down the elevator, through the marble lobby, and out into the bright afternoon sunshine. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the weight of 7 years lifting off her shoulders. Her phone buzzed in her purse, probably another message from her assistant about the project deadline, or maybe from her financial advisor about the new investment property she was closing on next week. Natasha hailed a cab and gave the driver an address in the upscale part of the city, the neighborhood Brandon had always said they could never afford. The neighborhood where her penthouse was waiting, the one she'd been buying in secret for the past 2 years, making payments from her real income, the income Brandon knew nothing about. As the cab pulled away from the curb, Natasha allowed herself a small smile. Brandon thought he'd discarded something worthless. He had no idea what he'd just lost. And by the time he found out, it would be far too late. 3 years earlier, Natasha had made a decision that changed everything. She'd been married to Brandon for 4 years at that point, and the cracks were already showing. He'd started making comments about her lack of ambition, questioning why she wasn't making more money with her writing. He'd begun comparing her to his co-workers' wives, women who had corporate jobs and brought home steady paychecks. What Brandon didn't know, what he never bothered to ask about, was that Natasha had always been good with computers. Exceptional, actually. She'd gotten her degree in computer science before they met, but Brandon had never paid attention to that detail. When they'd married, he'd been so focused on his own career in sales that he'd barely glanced at her resume. He'd assumed her freelance writing was her only income and she'd never corrected him. The truth was far different. Natasha had started her real career 6 months into their marriage, when a former college friend reached out about a contract position at a tech startup. The company needed a senior software developer who could work remotely and didn't mind using a pseudonym for client-facing work. The pay was good, $85,000 for a 6-month contract. She'd said yes without telling Brandon. At first, it was just practical. Brandon had become controlling about money, wanting to know exactly how much she made from each writing assignment. But he never questioned the hours she spent in their spare bedroom, which he assumed she was using to write blog posts. He never looked at her screen, never asked technical questions, never showed any interest in her work at all. So she coded. She built software. She solved problems. And she got very, very good at it. That first contract turned into a full-time position. Within a year, she was making $120,000 annually. Within 2 years, $200,000. By the time Brandon served her with divorce papers, she was earning $500,000 as a lead architect for a major tech company, working under the professional name N.R. Barrett. Nobody at her company knew she was married. Nobody knew about Brandon. She'd kept that part of her life completely separate, and now she understood why. Some instinct had told her to protect this part of herself, to keep it hidden, to maintain her independence. Natasha remembered the day she'd realized Brandon was cheating. She'd come home early from a coffee shop where she'd been debugging code, and found blonde hairs on their bed. Long, blonde hairs that definitely weren't hers. Her hair was dark, natural, cut in a practical bob. She'd found perfume that wasn't her scent. She'd found receipts for restaurants she'd never been to, hotels she'd never stayed in. She checked Brandon's phone that night while he slept. The messages with Veronica were explicit, cruel, and revealing. They'd mocked Natasha, called her boring and useless. Veronica had written, "When are you going to dump the dead weight?" Brandon had responded, "Soon. Just waiting for the right moment. She has nothing without me, so it won't be complicated." That had been 4 months ago. Instead of confronting him immediately, Natasha had made a plan. She'd consulted with her own lawyer, a lawyer Brandon knew nothing about. She'd moved money into accounts in her name only. She'd documented everything she needed to document. She'd prepared for the divorce that she knew was coming. When Brandon had finally sat her down 2 months later and announced he wanted a divorce, she'd acted surprised. She'd played the role he expected, the shocked, hurt wife who had no idea this was coming. She'd made it easy for him to feel like the powerful one, the one in control. And now, riding in the cab toward her real home, Natasha felt the exhaustion of maintaining that act finally lifting. She pulled out her phone and checked her messages. Her assistant, Tyler, had sent 3 emails about the software launch scheduled for next week. Her team was ready, the code was clean, and the client was excited. This project alone would earn her a $50,000 bonus. There was also a message from her financial advisor, Gerald. "Congratulations on the divorce being finalized. Shall we proceed with the investment properties we discussed? I also have the paperwork ready for your consulting business formation. Call me when you have time." Natasha smiled and typed back a quick response. "Yes to everything. Let's schedule a meeting for tomorrow." The cab pulled up in front of a sleek modern building, all glass and steel, with a doorman and underground parking. This was the Sterling, one of the most exclusive residential buildings in the city. Natasha had been making payments on her penthouse here for 2 years, paying in full just last month. "Have a good day, ma'am," the cab driver said as she paid the fare and added a generous tip. "Thank you," Natasha replied. "I think I will." The doorman James smiled when he saw her. "Welcome home, Ms. Reed. How was your day?" "Life-changing," she said honestly. She rode the elevator to the 23rd floor, walked down the quiet, carpeted hallway and unlocked her door. The penthouse was beautiful. 2 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city skyline, modern kitchen, hardwood floors. She'd furnished it slowly over the past year, piece by piece, creating a space that was entirely hers. Brandon had no idea this place existed. He thought she'd be scrambling to find a cheap studio apartment with his pathetic $2,000 check. Natasha set her purse down, kicked off her shoes and walked to the windows. The city stretched out before her, full of possibility and promise. She thought about the past 7 years, all the times Brandon had diminished her, all the comments about her being useless and dependent. She thought about Veronica, who thought she'd won some prize. They had no idea. Natasha's phone rang. It was her best friend from college, Angela, one of the few people who knew the truth about her double life. "So?" Angela asked immediately. "Is it done?" "It's done," Natasha confirmed. "And he still doesn't know?" "He has no idea. He gave me a check for $2,000 and told me to learn some skills." Angela burst out laughing. "Oh my God. That is rich. What are you going to do now?" Natasha looked out at her city, and felt something she hadn't felt in years, pure, uncomplicated joy. "Everything," she said. "I'm going to do everything." Brandon moved into Veronica's apartment 3 days after the divorce was finalized. It was a nice place, a 1-bedroom in a trendy neighborhood, decorated with that generic Instagram aesthetic that Veronica seemed to love. Everything was white and gold and carefully arranged for maximum photo opportunities. Veronica had already posted pictures of them together with captions like, "New beginnings," and "Finally happy." Brandon had liked every post, commented heart emojis, played the role of the devoted new boyfriend. But something felt off and it had started almost immediately. "Babe, can you help with rent this month?" Veronica had asked on his second night there. "The boutique had a slow month and I'm a little short." Brandon had stared at her. "I thought you said business was booming?" "It is, usually. But retail is unpredictable, you know? I just need like $1,500 to cover my half." $1,500. Brandon had it, barely, but it bothered him. During his marriage to Natasha, he'd never worried about bills. Somehow, everything had always been paid. He'd assumed it was because he was such a good provider, because his salary covered everything. Now, living without Natasha, he was realizing how expensive life actually was. His half of their old apartment's rent had been $1,200. Now he was paying $750 to stay with Veronica, plus another $1,500 to help her with her portion. That was $2,250 total, nearly double what he'd been paying before. Plus groceries, utilities, gas, insurance, and all the other costs that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. When he'd lived with Natasha, those things had just handled themselves. He'd never thought about it. "Sure, baby," he'd said to Veronica, transferring the money. "No problem." But it was a problem. His checking account balance was lower than it had ever been. Now, 2 weeks after the divorce, Brandon sat in his car outside his office building, looking at his bank statement on his phone. He'd spent $4,000 in 2 weeks. $4,000. He made good money, $85,000 a year, but somehow it wasn't stretching the way it used to. During his marriage, he'd always had money left over after bills. He'd bought nice clothes, eaten at good restaurants, maintained his car, joined an expensive gym. Natasha had never asked him for money. She'd paid for groceries sometimes with her writing money, though he'd always assumed it was just a small contribution from her pitiful freelance income. Now he couldn't figure out where his money was going. Everything cost more than he remembered. His phone buzzed. It was Veronica. "Hey babe, can you pick up dinner on the way home? I'm exhausted from the boutique. Maybe that Italian place? And grab a bottle of wine?" Brandon sighed. That Italian place was $60 minimum, and a decent bottle of wine was another $30. There went another $100. He texted back, "Sure thing." Inside he was starting to feel a twist of resentment. Wasn't Veronica supposed to be this ambitious, successful woman? Wasn't that the whole point? She was supposed to be different from Natasha, better than Natasha, more accomplished than Natasha. But her boutique seemed to constantly need money. She was always asking him to cover things, always claiming she'd pay him back later. Meanwhile, she wore designer clothes and carried expensive handbags and posted photos of her luxury lifestyle on social media. Brandon started his car and drove toward the Italian restaurant, his mind churning. Meanwhile, across the city, Natasha was having the best week of her life. She'd spent the past 2 weeks settling into her freedom. She'd rearranged her penthouse, bought fresh flowers for every room, and finally hung up the artwork she'd been collecting. She'd gone shopping for new clothes, not because she needed them but because she wanted to. She treated herself to spa days, nice dinners, and long walks through the city without having to check in with anyone. Work was going incredibly well. The software launch had been a massive success, and her client was already asking about future projects. Her boss had pulled her aside to discuss a promotion to Chief Technology Officer, a position that would come with a $600,000 salary plus stock options. "You're the obvious choice, NR," her boss had said, using her professional pseudonym. "Your work is exceptional, your leadership skills are outstanding, and the team respects you. I want to make this official by the end of the quarter." Natasha had accepted graciously, professionally, while inside she was celebrating. Chief Technology Officer. At 32 years old. With a salary that would make Brandon's eyes pop out of his head if he ever found out. Which he wouldn't. Because he was no longer part of her life. She'd blocked his number, blocked him on all social media, instructed her doorman to never let him up even if he somehow found her address. She'd created a clean break, a fresh start, a new chapter. Her lawyer had called earlier that week to confirm everything was finalized. The divorce was complete, the paperwork was filed, and Natasha was officially single. Patricia, the lawyer who'd witnessed Brandon's cruel speech, had added something unexpected at the end of the call. "Ms. Reed, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I've been doing divorce law for 25 years. Your ex-husband is one of the most arrogant men I've ever encountered in this office. I hope you're doing well." Natasha had smiled. "I'm doing better than well, Patricia. Thank you." That evening, Natasha met Angela for dinner at an upscale restaurant they'd been wanting to try. Angela arrived wearing a bright red dress and a huge smile. "Look at you," Angela said, hugging her tight. "You're glowing. Actual glowing. This is the freedom glow." "I feel amazing," Natasha admitted as they sat down. "I didn't realize how much weight I was carrying until it was gone. Brandon was like this constant drain on my energy, always making me feel small and worthless. Now I wake up every morning and remember that I'm free." "Has he tried to contact you?" "Can't. I blocked him everywhere." Natasha picked up the wine list. "Let's order the expensive bottle. I'm celebrating." They ordered a $200 bottle of wine that made Angela's eyes widen, but Natasha just laughed. After years of hiding her success, she was finally able to enjoy it openly with people who actually cared about her. "So what's next?" Angela asked. "Career-wise, life-wise, all of it? CTO position is basically mine. I'm starting my own consulting business on the side. I'm traveling, I booked a trip to Japan next month. And I'm looking at investment properties." Natasha paused. "I'm building the life I always wanted without anyone telling me I can't or shouldn't." "You're living the dream," Angela said. "Meanwhile, Brandon is probably struggling to figure out how to pay rent." They both laughed, though Natasha felt no real malice toward Brandon. She just felt nothing. He was a closed chapter, a mistake she'd learned from, a person who no longer mattered. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from a tech conference she'd applied to months ago. They wanted her to be a keynote speaker at their annual event in December. The topic: Success Without Compromise, Building Your Career on Your Own Terms. Natasha smiled and accepted the invitation. Brandon's world was shrinking. Hers was expanding. And it was only just beginning. It happened on a random Tuesday, 3 weeks after the divorce. Brandon was scrolling through social media during his lunch break, mindlessly clicking through posts, when he saw something that made him freeze. It was a photo from his former college roommate, Jerome. The caption read, "Amazing tech conference this weekend. Great keynote speeches, especially from the brilliant N.R. Barrett on software architecture. The future is bright." The photo showed Jerome standing next to a black woman in a professional navy suit, her hair styled in a sleek bob, holding what looked like an award or plaque. The woman was smiling, confident, standing at what appeared to be a conference podium with Tech Forward Annual Summit displayed on the screen behind her. The woman was Natasha. Brandon dropped his phone. He picked it up again, zooming in on the photo, his heart pounding. That was definitely his ex-wife. Same face, same features, but she looked different. She looked polished, professional, powerful. Nothing like the frumpy, unsuccessful woman he'd convinced himself she was. Who the hell was N.R. Barrett? He clicked on Jerome's profile and scrolled back through his posts. There, another photo from 6 months ago. Great discussion on emerging tech trends with N.R. Barrett and the team from Innovate Tech Solutions. This woman is a genius. Innovate Tech Solutions. Brandon knew that name. They were a major player in the tech industry, one of the fastest growing companies in the country. They did government contracts, enterprise software, cutting-edge development work. And Natasha worked there? No, that couldn't be right. Natasha was a failed freelance writer who made maybe $10,000 a year if she was lucky. Natasha spent her days at home, supposedly writing articles that nobody read. She had no skills, no ambition, no career. Brandon's hands were shaking as he opened a new browser and searched N.R. Barrett Innovate Tech. The results made his blood run cold. Article after article popped up. N.R. Barrett leads revolutionary cloud architecture project. Innovate Tech as Barrett wins Developer of the Year award. How N.R. Barrett built the most secure government database in U.S. history. He clicked on the most recent article, published just last week. It was from a major tech publication. N.R. Barrett, lead software architect at Innovate Tech Solutions, has been promoted to Chief Technology Officer, making her one of the youngest CTOs in the industry. Barrett, who has maintained a relatively low public profile despite her groundbreaking work, brings 10 years of experience in software development and cybersecurity to her new role. Under her leadership, Innovate Tech has secured contracts worth over $50 million and developed some of the most advanced software systems in both private and public sectors. Brandon read the article 3 times, each time feeling sicker. There was a professional photo of Natasha. No N.R. Barrett, looking absolutely nothing like the woman he'd divorced. She wore an expensive suit, her natural hair was styled beautifully, and she had the kind of confidence that only came from genuine success. He scrolled down to the comments section, where tech professionals were congratulating her, discussing her achievements, praising her work. Someone had linked to a video of her speaking at a conference 2 years ago, where she discussed advanced programming concepts that went completely over Brandon's head. His mind reeled. 2 years ago, he'd been married to her. 2 years ago, he'd been telling her she was worthless, that she contributed nothing, that she needed to get a real job. And she'd been doing this. All of this. While he'd mocked her for sitting at her computer in their spare bedroom. Brandon's phone rang, making him jump. It was his manager. Mitchell, where are you? You've got the Henderson call in 5 minutes. Right, sorry, on my way, Brandon mumbled, but he couldn't move. He couldn't stop staring at the photo of Natasha, N.R. Barrett, accepting an award, looking successful and happy and completely unbothered by his absence. How much did a CTO make? He searched frantically. Chief Technology Officer salary, Innovate Tech. The results showed a range, $500,000 to $750,000 base salary, plus bonuses and stock options. Brandon felt like he might throw up. $500,000. At minimum. That was 6 times his salary. 6 times what he made, and he'd been calling her useless. He'd given her a $2,000 check and told her to learn some skills, while she was making more in a month than he made in a year. Brandon. His manager's voice came through the phone again, angry now. Get in here. He stood up on shaking legs, grabbed his things and somehow made it to the conference room. But he couldn't focus during the call. His mind kept replaying every conversation he'd had with Natasha, every time he belittled her, every comment about her lack of ambition. She'd never defended herself. She'd never corrected him. She just let him think she was nothing. What? The realization hit him like a truck. She'd been protecting her assets. She'd known the marriage was failing, known he was an egotistical jerk, and she'd kept her career secret so he couldn't touch it in the divorce. And it had worked. He'd gotten nothing. He'd walked away thinking he was being generous by giving her a couple $1,000s, when she probably spent more than that on a single work trip. After the meeting, Brandon locked himself in his office and did something he knew he shouldn't do. He created a fake social media profile and started searching for any information he could find about Natasha. He found her professional LinkedIn profile under her real name, Natasha Reed. It was impressive, listing her education, computer science degree with honors from a top university. How had he forgotten that? Her work history, her achievements. Her current position was listed as Chief Technology Officer at Innovate Tech Solutions. Under skills, she had endorsements from dozens of people for things like software architecture, team leadership, cybersecurity, and full-stack development. Brandon felt a fresh wave of shame. He'd been married to her for 7 years and never once asked about her degree, her skills, or her actual career goals. He just assumed she was failing at writing and left it at that. He found more photos from the tech conference. Natasha looked genuinely happy in all of them, laughing with colleagues, accepting awards, giving presentations. She looked like she belonged in that world because she did. Then he found something that made his stomach drop even further. It was a photo from a real estate website, posted 2 days ago. Congratulations to Ms. Natasha Reed on the purchase of her new investment property in the downtown district. This historic building will be converted into luxury apartments. An investment property. She was buying investment properties. Brandon closed his laptop and put his head in his hands. What had he done? He'd left a woman who was worth millions. He'd mocked her, belittled her, cheated on her, and thrown her away for Veronica, whose boutique was struggling and who constantly needed money. He'd made the worst mistake of his life, and there was no way to fix it. His phone buzzed. A text from Veronica. Babe, the boutique needs a $3,000 inventory investment. Can you help? I'll pay you back when sales pick up. Brandon stared at the message, then at his bank account balance of $1,200. He'd traded a secret millionaire for a woman who couldn't even keep her boutique afloat. And the worst part was, Natasha had never said a word. She just let him go, let him think he was winning, let him destroy his own life with his arrogance and ignorance. Brandon opened his phone's blocked contacts and found Natasha's number. His finger hovered over the unblock button. He needed to talk to her. He needed to explain, to apologize, to somehow make this right. He needed her back. Brandon unblocked Natasha's number and immediately typed out a text message. Natasha, we need to talk. I just found out about your career. Why didn't you tell me? We should discuss this. Call me. He hit send and waited, staring at his phone screen. 5 minutes passed. 10. 20. No response. He tried again. I know I made mistakes, but you should have told me the truth. We could have worked things out if I'd known. Please call me. Still nothing. The text showed as delivered, but not read. She hadn't even opened it. Over the next 3 days, Brandon sent 12 more messages. Each one went unread. He tried calling, but the phone rang once before going straight to voicemail, which meant she'd set his number to automatically reject. He was blocked again, or she'd changed settings to send his calls directly to voicemail. Natasha, please, just one conversation. I deserve an explanation. I made a mistake leaving you. I see that now. Let's talk about reconciliation. You lied to me about who you were. That's not fair. At least give me a chance to understand. Every message was delivered but never read. Brandon became obsessed. He couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything except the fact that he'd walked away from a fortune. During sales meetings, he zoned out. His performance numbers dropped. His manager pulled him aside twice to ask if everything was okay. I'm fine, Brandon lied. But he wasn't fine. He was spiraling. He showed up at their old apartment building one afternoon, thinking maybe Natasha was still living there, but the landlord told him she'd moved out weeks ago and left no forwarding address. He tried to get information about where she'd gone, but the landlord refused to share anything. Privacy laws, the landlord said firmly. I can't help you. Brandon sat in his car outside the building, feeling desperate and foolish. Where did she live now? Somewhere expensive, obviously. Somewhere he couldn't afford to visit without looking like the failure he was becoming. He tried searching for her on social media again, but her personal accounts were all set to private. Her professional accounts showed only work-related posts. No personal information, no location tags, nothing he could use to find her. At home, Veronica was getting suspicious. Who do you keep texting? She asked one night as Brandon frantically sent another message to Natasha's unresponsive number. Just work stuff, he muttered. You've been weird ever since the divorce finalized. Are you having regrets? Veronica's voice had an edge to it. No, of course not, Brandon lied again. I'm just stressed about money. Speaking of money, Veronica said, did you transfer that $3,000 for my inventory? I really need it by tomorrow. Brandon looked at his bank account. $847. He'd have to transfer money from his savings, which was already dangerously low. I'll take care of it, he said. But the resentment was building. 3 weeks ago, he'd thought Veronica was his prize, his upgrade from boring, unsuccessful Natasha. Now he was realizing that Veronica's boutique was barely staying afloat, that she had terrible business sense, and that she expected him to fund her dreams while contributing almost nothing herself. Meanwhile, Natasha, quiet, useless Natasha, was a millionaire. Brandon finally managed to track down Jerome's number. They'd been good friends in college but had drifted apart over the years. He called at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, desperate. "Brandon? Wow, it's been a while," Jerome answered. "Hey man. Listen, I saw your post from that tech conference. The one with N.R. Barrett." "Oh yeah. That conference was incredible. She gave an amazing keynote about secure software architecture." "Why?" Brandon's throat was tight. That's my ex-wife." Silence on the other end. Then, wait. "Natasha is N.R. Barrett? You're Natasha? You knew her as Natasha? We met at your wedding, remember? I talked to her for like an hour about programming languages. She was brilliant even then." Jerome paused. "Hold on. You didn't know she worked at Innovate Tech?" "I thought she was a freelance writer," Brandon admitted, his voice small. Jerome laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. "Dude. She's been one of the top software architects in the industry for years. She's famous in tech circles. Well, as famous as someone can be while maintaining privacy. How did you not know this?" "She never told me. Or you never asked," Jerome said bluntly. "Brandon, I remember your wedding. You barely let her talk. You spent the whole time talking about your sales job and your goals. I tried to ask her about her work, and you cut in to say she was trying to make it as a writer. She just smiled and changed the subject." Brandon felt sick. "Can you give me her contact information? I need to talk to her." "Absolutely not," Jerome said firmly. "If she didn't tell you about her career, there was a reason. And honestly, after seeing how happy she looked at that conference, free and unburdened, I think she made the right call. Leave her alone, man." "But I made a mistake." "Yeah, you did. A big one. But that's not her problem anymore." Jerome's voice softened slightly. "Look, I don't want to be harsh, but I've known about her work for years. She's exceptional. And from what I could see at the conference, she's thriving without you. Let her be happy." Jerome hung up. Brandon sat in his car, parked outside Veronica's apartment, feeling more desperate than ever. He tried a different approach. He found Innovate Tech's office building, a sleek glass tower in the business district, and decided to show up in person. If Natasha wouldn't answer his calls, he'd wait for her in person. He took a half-day off work and arrived at Innovate Tech at 4 p.m., figuring she'd leave around 5 or 6. He stood in the lobby, trying to look casual, but security noticed him immediately. "Can I help you, sir?" a security guard asked. "I'm waiting for someone." "N.R. Barrett. She's an employee here." The guard's expression turned suspicious. "Do you have an appointment?" "She's my ex-wife. I just need to talk to her for a few minutes." "I'm going to need you to leave, sir." "I just need 5 minutes." "Sir, if you don't leave immediately, I'll call the police." Brandon left, humiliated and furious. He sat in his car across the street, watching the building entrance, hoping to catch sight of Natasha leaving. But the building had multiple exits, underground parking, and hundreds of employees. After 3 hours, he gave up. That night, Veronica confronted him. "You're obsessed with your ex-wife," she said flatly. "I'm not stupid, Brandon. You've been acting strange ever since the divorce. What's going on?" Brandon wanted to lie, but he was too tired, too defeated. "She's not who I thought she was." "What does that mean?" "She's rich. Like really rich. She's been making hundreds of thousands of dollars while we were married, and I had no idea." Veronica's expression changed from suspicious to calculating. "Wait, she has money? How much money?" "She's a chief technology officer. Probably making $500,000 a year at least." Veronica's eyes widened. "And you divorced her? Are you insane?" "I didn't know." "How did you not know? How does someone not know their spouse makes that much money?" "She kept it secret." Veronica started laughing, a bitter, angry sound. "Oh my God. You're such an idiot. You left a millionaire for me in my struggling boutique. This is incredible. Can we not do this right now?" Brandon snapped. "Do what?" "Point out what a massive mistake you made." Veronica grabbed her purse. "I'm going out. I need to think about whether this relationship is even worth my time if you're going to spend every day pining after your rich ex-wife." She slammed the door on her way out. Brandon sat alone in Veronica's apartment, surrounded by her expensive furniture that she couldn't actually afford, wearing clothes he'd spent too much money on, living a life that was rapidly falling apart. He pulled out his phone and typed one more message to Natasha. She'd made a deliberate choice to see what he would say. Some part of her had known this was coming, knew that once he discovered the truth, he'd try to come back. She read each message with growing disgust. "I deserve an explanation. Let's talk about reconciliation." You lied to me. Not once did he take real responsibility. Not once did he say, I was wrong to treat you the way I did, without immediately following it with a justification or a blame shift. Every message was about what he deserved, what he needed, what he wanted. Natasha deleted each message after reading it and moved on with her day. She was thriving. The CTO position was officially hers, and she'd spent the last 2 weeks building her new team, restructuring departments, and planning the company's technical roadmap for the next 3 years. Her colleagues respected her, her boss trusted her judgment, and she was finally getting the recognition she deserved. Outside of work, she'd started therapy with Dr. Michelle Patterson, a Black woman psychologist who specialized in helping people recover from emotionally abusive relationships. Their first session had been difficult. Natasha hadn't realized how much damage Brandon's constant criticism had done to her self-esteem. You weren't just hiding your career from him, Dr. Patterson had said gently. You were hiding yourself, your true self, because he made it clear that your real achievements didn't matter to him. Natasha had cried in that session, finally releasing years of suppressed hurt and anger. But afterward, she'd felt lighter, clear, more certain that leaving Brandon was the best decision she'd ever made. Now, 3 weeks into her new life, she was learning how to fully inhabit her success without apologizing for it. She'd started accepting social invitations from colleagues. She'd joined a book club. She'd signed up for a painting class she'd always wanted to try. She was building a life that was rich and full and entirely her own. Then Brandon showed up at her office building. Security called her immediately. Ms. Barrett, there's a man in the lobby claiming to be your ex-husband. He's asking to see you. We've asked him to leave, but I wanted to confirm. Do you know this person? Yes, Natasha said, her voice steady. His name is Brandon Mitchell. He is my ex-husband, and I have no desire to see him or speak with him. If he returns, please call the police. Understood. We've already escorted him out, but I'll add him to our security watch list. Thank you. That evening, Natasha called her lawyer, Patricia. He's not taking the hint, Natasha explained. He's found out about my career, and now he's trying to contact me constantly. He showed up at my workplace today. Do you want to pursue a restraining order? Patricia asked. I was hoping it wouldn't come to that. I understand, but if his behavior escalates, that's your best option. In the meantime, document everything. Save all messages, note any appearances, keep a record. If you need legal protection, you'll have evidence. Natasha created a folder on her computer labeled Brandon Harassment and started saving screenshots of every text message, every call attempt, every piece of evidence that showed his refusal to respect her boundaries. A week later, Angela came over for their regular dinner. He won't stop, Natasha said, showing Angela the latest batch of messages. Angela read through them, her expression darkening. These are manipulative as hell. Look at this one. I deserve an explanation. No, he doesn't. He deserves nothing from you. Part of me wonders if I should just respond once, tell him to leave me alone, make it clear. Don't, Angela said firmly. That's what he wants. Any response is engagement, and engagement gives him hope that he can change your mind. You need to stay completely silent. I know you're right. It's just exhausting. Then let's get that restraining order. You shouldn't have to deal with this. The next day, Natasha went back to Patricia's office and filed for a restraining order. She provided all the evidence, the texts, the call logs, the security report from her office building. Patricia assured her they had a strong case. The hearing is in 2 weeks, Patricia said. In the meantime, continue documenting everything. Don't respond to him at all. Those 2 weeks were strangely peaceful. Brandon seemed to sense something had changed because his messages slowed down. Maybe he'd consulted a lawyer of his own. Maybe he'd finally realized she was serious about not wanting contact. Natasha used the time to focus on herself. She booked the trip to Japan she'd been planning, scheduled for next month. She bought new furniture for her penthouse. She had lunch with her parents and finally told them the whole story, the secret career, the divorce, Brandon's current harassment. Her mother had cried, not from sadness but from pride. You protected yourself, she'd said. You were smart. And now look at you, successful, independent, free. I'm so proud of you, baby. Her father had been less emotional but equally supportive. That boy never deserved you. I always thought he talked too much and listened too little. You're better off. The court hearing for the restraining order was short and straightforward. Brandon had been served with notice and actually showed up, which surprised Natasha. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, he had dark circles under his eyes, and his usual arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like desperation. The judge reviewed the evidence quickly, the dozens of unreturned messages, the appearance at her workplace despite being asked to leave, the pattern of harassment. "Mr. Mitchell, do you have anything to say?" the judge asked. Brandon stood up. "Your Honor, I just want to talk to my ex-wife. I made mistakes, but I deserve a chance to apologize properly. She lied to me throughout our marriage and I just need closure." The judge's expression turned cold. "Ms. Reed was under no obligation to share her financial information with you, especially given that the marriage was ending. She has made it clear she doesn't wish to have contact with you, and you have repeatedly violated those boundaries. I'm granting the restraining order." The judge outlined the terms. Brandon couldn't contact Natasha directly or indirectly, couldn't come within 500 feet of her home or workplace, couldn't contact her friends or family on her behalf. "If you violate this order, Mr. Mitchell, you will be arrested. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Brandon said quietly. Natasha felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It was really over. Legally, officially, completely over. As they left the courthouse, Brandon tried to catch her eye, tried to mouth something to her, but she looked straight ahead and walked past him without acknowledgement. Outside, Patricia gave her a congratulatory hug. "You're free. Really, truly free." Natasha smiled. "I know." That night, she celebrated with Angela, toasting with expensive wine in her beautiful penthouse with the city lights twinkling outside her windows. "To freedom," Angela said, raising her glass. "To new beginnings," Natasha added. They clinked glasses and Natasha felt something she hadn't felt in 7 years. Complete peace. Brandon was in her past. He couldn't hurt her anymore. He couldn't reach her anymore. He couldn't diminish her anymore. She had stood firm, held her boundaries, and protected herself. And now, finally, she could fully step into the life she'd always deserved. Brandon's life unraveled quickly after the restraining order. The court order meant he couldn't contact Natasha at all. Not through text, not through social media, not through mutual friends. He was legally barred from going anywhere near her. For someone who'd spent the last month obsessing over his ex-wife, the forced distance felt like a prison sentence. But the restraining order was just the beginning of his problems. Veronica left him 2 days after the court hearing. "I can't do this," she'd said, standing in her apartment with her arms crossed. "You're broke, you're obsessed with your ex, and honestly, you're bringing me down. My boutique is struggling enough without dealing with your drama." "I'm not broke," Brandon had protested weakly, though they both knew it was a lie. His bank account was hovering around $300, and he had credit card bills piling up. "You're worse than broke, you're pathetic," Veronica had said coldly. "I thought you were this successful guy with potential. Turns out you're just a guy who let a millionaire walk away because you were too stupid to see what you had. I'm not going to be the woman who settles for your leftovers." She'd given him 3 days to move out. Brandon had nowhere to go. His salary couldn't cover a decent apartment on his own, not in the city, not with his spending habits and debt. He'd moved into a cheap studio in a bad neighborhood, the kind of place he would have mocked a year ago. The apartment was tiny, with thin walls, flickering lights, and a persistent smell of mildew. It was humiliating. Work wasn't going any better. His sales numbers had dropped dramatically over the past 2 months. He'd missed quotas 3 months in a row, and his manager had put him on a performance improvement plan. "Brandon, I don't know what's going on with you personally, but you need to figure it out," his manager Tom had said during their review meeting. "Your numbers are in the bottom 10% of the team. You're distracted, you're missing calls, you're showing up late. This isn't the performance we expect from senior sales associates." "I'll do better," Brandon had promised, but he couldn't focus. Every sales call reminded him that he'd lost a woman who made 10 times what he did. Every client rejection felt like the universe confirming what he was starting to believe. He was a failure. One afternoon, his mother called. "Brandon, honey, I heard about the divorce," she said carefully. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom. Your Aunt Rita told me she saw Natasha at some tech conference on TV. She said Natasha looked wonderful and was giving a speech about software development. I didn't know she worked in tech." Brandon closed his eyes. Of course his family was finding out. Of course they were seeing Natasha's success while watching his life fall apart. "Yeah, it turns out she had a whole career I didn't know about," he said bitterly. "What do you mean you didn't know? Wasn't she your wife?" "She kept it secret, Mom. She lied to me for years." There was a long pause. Then his mother said something that cut deep. "Or maybe you never bothered to ask. Your father and I always thought you talked too much and listened too little. That poor girl spent 7 years with you, and I'm starting to think we didn't know her at all, because you didn't know her at all." "Mom?" I'm disappointed in you, Brandon. Not because of the divorce but because of how you're handling it. From what Rita told me, Natasha seems to be doing just fine. Maybe you should focus on your own life instead of whatever you're doing now. She hung up. Brandon sat in his depressing studio apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes, eating instant noodles for the third night in a row because he couldn't afford anything else, and felt the full weight of his mistakes crashing down. He'd lost Natasha. He'd lost Veronica. His family was disappointed. His career was failing. His friends, what few he had left, were avoiding him because all he did was complain about his ex-wife. He opened his laptop and searched for Natasha one more time, even though he knew he shouldn't. Her LinkedIn profile showed a new update. She'd been featured in a major business magazine's 30 Under 35 list of tech innovators. The article included an interview. "What's your secret to success?" the interviewer had asked. "I think it's important to know your worth and never let anyone convince you you're less than what you are," Natasha had answered. "I spent years in an environment where I wasn't valued, where my contribution," and she'd moved on. She'd thrived. While he was eating noodles in a studio apartment and facing potential job loss, she was being celebrated in magazines and building an empire. The universe had a cruel sense of justice. 2 weeks later, Brandon lost his job. "We're letting you go," Tom said, not unkindly. "Your performance hasn't improved and we need team members who are fully committed. We'll provide 2 weeks severance, but effective today you're no longer employed here." Brandon cleaned out his desk in a daze, carrying his few belongings in a cardboard box like a cliché from a movie. His coworkers avoided eye contact. Everyone knew he was failing. He applied for unemployment benefits and started job hunting, but his heart wasn't in it. Every interview went poorly because he couldn't muster enthusiasm for anything. His studio apartment lease was month to month, which was good because he couldn't afford it much longer. He started looking at rooms for rent, sharing apartments with strangers, anything that would keep him housed. One night, scrolling through social media on his fake profile, he saw a post from Jerome. "Amazing conversation with N.R. Barrett about her new consulting business. She's launching a tech mentorship program for underrepresented groups in STEM. This woman's impact is incredible." A consulting business. On top of her CTO position. Natasha was expanding her empire while Brandon couldn't even keep a job. He thought about sending her another message. Just one more, even though it would violate the restraining order. Just to tell her he was sorry, that he understood now, that he would give anything to go back and treat her differently. But he didn't. Because he knew it wouldn't matter. Nothing he said could change what he'd done or who he'd been. Brandon had spent 7 years of marriage thinking he was the prize, thinking he was carrying dead weight, thinking he deserved better than Natasha. Now he was alone, broke, jobless, and facing the truth. Natasha had always been the prize. And he'd thrown her away without a second thought. While Brandon's world crumbled, Natasha's world expanded in ways she'd never imagined. The CTO position turned out to be everything she'd hoped for and more. She had a team of 30 developers under her leadership, a budget of $10 million for new projects, and direct access to the CEO and board of directors. Her input shaped the company's entire technical direction. But more than that, she felt respected, valued. Her first major project as CTO was overseeing the development of a cybersecurity platform for federal agencies. It was complex, high-stakes work that required coordination across multiple teams, and Natasha handled it flawlessly. When they delivered the platform ahead of schedule and under budget, the client was so impressed they signed a contract for 2 additional projects. "You're a miracle worker," her CEO, Robert Chin, told her during their quarterly review. "I knew you were talented, but you've exceeded every expectation. The board is talking about fast-tracking you for VP of Technology within 2 years." VP of Technology. The position would come with a salary over $800,000, plus significant equity in the company. Natasha smiled. "I appreciate the confidence. I'm excited about where we're headed." Outside of work, she'd started her consulting business just like she'd planned. Reed Technology Consulting, specialized in helping mid-sized companies upgrade their software infrastructure and security. She took on 2 clients initially, working evenings and weekends, and within a month had earned an additional $40,000. The money was almost secondary to the satisfaction. She was building something entirely her own, making decisions without answering to anyone, helping companies solve real problems. Her consulting work led to speaking opportunities. She gave talks at 3 different tech conferences over 2 months, each time receiving standing ovations and dozens of LinkedIn connection requests. People wanted to work with her, learn from her, hire her. "You're becoming a brand," Angela told her over brunch one Sunday. N.R. Barrett is a name people recognize now. How does that feel? Surreal, Natasha admitted. A year ago I was hiding everything. Now I'm speaking in front of hundreds of people about my work. It's liberating. You deserve this, Angela said firmly. Every bit of success, every bit of recognition. You worked for it while dealing with a husband who didn't appreciate you. Now you get to enjoy it freely. Natasha had also launched the mentorship program Jerome had mentioned in his post. She called it Code Forward, and it provided free coding education and mentorship to women and minorities interested in tech careers. She'd partnered with 3 local community colleges, recruited 5 other senior developers to volunteer as mentors, and secured funding from tech companies who wanted to support diversity initiatives. The program launched with 30 students. Within 3 weeks they had a waiting list of 200. This is incredible, one of her co-mentors, a senior developer named Kimberly, said during their planning meeting. These students are so eager to learn. You're changing lives, Natasha. We're changing lives, Natasha corrected, but she felt the impact deeply. Many of the students reminded her of herself at that age, talented, ambitious, but unsure if they belonged in tech spaces that often felt unwelcoming. One student, a 19-year-old named Tasha, approached her after the second class. Ms. Reed, can I ask you something personal? Of course. How did you make it? Like really make it? There's so many people telling me I can't do this, that tech isn't for people like me. How did you push through? Natasha thought about Brandon, about all his dismissive comments, about all the time she'd had to hide her success to protect herself. I stopped waiting for permission to be great, Natasha said. I stopped letting other people's small opinions make me small. You're here because you're talented and you're determined. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, and that includes yourself. Tasha's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I needed to hear that. These moments made everything worthwhile. 3 months after the divorce, Natasha traveled to Japan like she'd planned. She spent 2 weeks exploring Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka, visiting temples and museums, eating incredible food, and finally taking the time to just exist without pressure or responsibility. She posted photos from her trip on her personal social media, which was still private, but she'd started accepting friend requests from colleagues and people in her professional network. The photos showed her smiling in front of cherry blossoms, trying calligraphy, walking through bamboo forests. You look free, one colleague commented. I am, Natasha replied. When she returned from Japan, there was a surprise waiting in her inbox. An invitation to speak at TechCon, one of the largest and most prestigious tech conferences in the world. The organizers wanted her to give a keynote address about leadership in tech. This is huge, her assistant Tyler said when she told him. TechCon keynotes are career-defining. They're basically saying you're one of the most important voices in the industry. Natasha accepted immediately. She also finally furnished her penthouse completely. She'd hired an interior designer and together they'd created a space that felt like home. Modern but warm, minimalist but comfortable. Her favorite part was the reading nook by the floor-to-ceiling windows, where she could sit with a book and watch the city lights at night. Angela visited one evening and just stood in the living room taking it all in. This is your space, Angela said softly. Completely yours. No compromises, no hiding. Just you and your success and your beautiful life. It feels good, Natasha said. Really good. That night, curled up in her reading nook with a glass of wine and a novel she'd been meaning to read for months, Natasha reflected on how far she'd come. 6 months ago, she'd been sitting in a lawyer's office listening to Brandon call her useless. She'd been hiding her income, her achievements, her entire professional identity. Now she was a CTO, a consultant, a speaker, a mentor, and a business owner. She was respected in her industry, financially secure, and genuinely happy. The best revenge, she realized, wasn't making Brandon pay for what he'd done. It was building a life so fulfilling that he became completely irrelevant to it. She didn't think about him much anymore. When she did, it was with a distant sort of bemusement, like remembering an embarrassing phase she'd gone through years ago. He'd been a chapter in her life, a learning experience, but he wasn't her story. Her phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Reed, this is Preston Cole from Venture Capital Partners. We're interested in discussing potential funding for your consulting business if you're considering expansion. Would you be open to a conversation? Natasha smiled. Venture capitalists were reaching out to her now. Her little side business was attracting serious attention. She typed back, I'd be interested in hearing more. Let's schedule a call. The future stretched out before her, full of possibility and promise. And Brandon wasn't in it at all. Natasha hadn't thought about Brandon in weeks when she saw him at the TechCon conference. She was backstage, preparing for her keynote speech, reviewing her notes one last time. The conference hall was packed. Over 2,000 people in the audience, with thousands more streaming online. This was the biggest speaking engagement of her career. 5 minutes, Ms. Barrett, the stage manager said. Natasha took a deep breath, smoothing down her navy suit. She felt ready, confident, prepared. This speech was important, not just for her career but for the message she wanted to send to every person who'd ever been dismissed or underestimated. Then, as she was walking toward the stage entrance, she saw him. Brandon was in the hallway near the conference registration area, arguing with security. "I just need to get in for 5 minutes," he was saying, his voice loud and desperate. "I need to see N.R. Barrett. It's important." Natasha froze. What was he doing here? This was a professional conference, a major event. Had he actually bought a ticket just to try to see her? "Sir, if you don't have credentials, you can't enter the keynote hall," the security guard said firmly. "I'm her ex-husband. She'll want to see me." "Actually, I won't," Natasha said, stepping forward. Brandon's head whipped around. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Natasha." "It's Ms. Barrett or Ms. Reed in this context," she said coldly. "What are you doing here?" He looked terrible. His suit was cheap and ill-fitting, his face was drawn, and he had the desperate look of someone whose life had completely fallen apart. "I bought a ticket," he said. "I have every right to be at this conference." "You have a restraining order that says you're not allowed within 500 feet of me," Natasha replied. "Which you're currently violating." The security guard's expression changed immediately. "Sir, if there's a restraining order..." "Just let me talk to you for 2 minutes," Brandon pleaded, ignoring security. "Please, Natasha. I've lost everything. My job, my apartment, Veronica. Everything. I was wrong, okay? I was so wrong about you, about us, about everything. I need you to hear that." People were starting to stare. Other conference attendees were slowing down, watching the scene unfold. Natasha felt a flash of anger. He was doing this here, now, at the most important professional moment of her life. "Ms. Barrett, should we call the police?" the security guard asked. Natasha looked at Brandon, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no satisfaction at his downfall. Just a distant sense of relief that she'd escaped when she did. "I need to give a speech," she said to the security guard. "Please ensure he's escorted from the premises and doesn't re-enter. If he refuses, yes, call the police." "Natasha, wait." Brandon started forward, but 2 security guards blocked his path. "You called me useless," Natasha said quietly, and her voice was so cold that Brandon stopped moving. "You told me I was dead weight. You gave me a $2,000 check and told me to learn some skills. You made me feel small every single day for 7 years. I didn't know." "You didn't know because you never asked. You never listened. You never saw me as a person worth knowing." She took a step closer, her voice steady and clear. "I don't owe you forgiveness. I don't owe you closure. I don't owe you anything. What you're feeling right now, the regret, the loss, that's yours to carry. Not mine. But I still love you." Natasha laughed, a sharp sound. "No, you don't. You love what I can give you. You love my money, my success, my ability to make your life easier. But you never loved me. If you had, you would have seen me when I was right in front of you." The stage manager appeared at her elbow. "Ms. Barrett, we need you on stage." Natasha nodded, then looked at Brandon one last time. "Goodbye, Brandon. I hope you figure out your life. But I won't be part of it." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there with security guards on either side. She didn't look back. Backstage, Natasha took 3 deep breaths, centering herself. She couldn't let Brandon's presence throw her off. This speech was too important. "You okay?" the stage manager asked. "I'm perfect," Natasha said, and she meant it. The announcement came through the speakers. "Please welcome to the stage Chief Technology Officer of Innovate Tech Solutions and founder of Code Forward, N.R. Barrett." Natasha walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The lights were bright, the crowd was huge, and for a moment she felt the magnitude of this moment. Standing here, being celebrated, being recognized for her work and her vision. She approached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and smiled at the audience. "Thank you," she began. "I want to talk today about value, specifically about knowing your value when the world tells you you're worthless." The audience leaned forward, engaged. "I spent years of my life in an environment where I was told daily that I wasn't enough, that I didn't contribute, that I was lucky to have what I had because I didn't deserve it." She paused. "Some of you know what that feels like. Maybe it was a job, a relationship, a family dynamic. Maybe it was an entire industry telling you that you didn't belong. Heads nodded throughout the audience. Here's what I learned. Other people's inability to see your value does not diminish your value. Their blindness is not your burden to carry. Your worth exists whether or not anyone acknowledges it. More applause. I could have spent years trying to prove myself to someone who was determined not to see me. Instead, I focused on building something real, skills, experience, a career that was mine. And when the time came to walk away from that toxic environment, I walked away whole. Because I'd never given my power to someone who didn't respect it. She looked out at the crowd, seeing so many faces, young people, older professionals, people of all backgrounds who'd come to hear her speak. My message to you is simple. Don't shrink yourself to fit into spaces that weren't built for you. Build your own spaces. Create your own opportunities. Surround yourself with people who see your value and celebrate it. And never, ever let someone convince you that you're less than what you are. The audience erupted in applause. People stood up, the ovation growing louder and longer. Natasha continued her speech, discussing leadership, innovation, and the future of technology. She talked about her mentorship program, about creating inclusive spaces in tech, about using success to lift others up. When she finished, the standing ovation lasted a full 2 minutes. People were wiping tears from their eyes, nodding enthusiastically, taking notes. As Natasha left the stage, 3 different conference attendees stopped her to say her speech had changed their perspective, given them courage, inspired them to stop accepting less than they deserved. Tyler was waiting in the wings with her phone. You have 27 new speaking requests, 6 interview requests from major publications, and something from venture capital partners about wanting to fund a major expansion of Code Forward. Natasha smiled. Forward them all to my assistant. We'll review tomorrow. As she was leaving through the back exit to avoid the crowds, security informed her that Brandon had been escorted off the premises and warned that any further attempts to contact her would result in immediate arrest. Thank you, Natasha said sincerely. She stepped out into the late afternoon sunshine, feeling lighter than she had in years. She'd faced Brandon, said what needed to be said, and moved on without breaking stride. Her phone buzzed. It was Angela. I watched the live stream. You were amazing. That speech brought me to tears. So proud of you. Natasha replied, thank you. I meant every word. She hailed a cab back to her hotel, already thinking about her next project, her next goal, her next achievement. Brandon had wanted closure. She'd given him something better, the truth. And now she was free to continue building the life she deserved. A life full of success, respect, and genuine happiness. A life that had no room for people who couldn't see her worth. A life that was entirely, beautifully her own. 6 months after the conference, Natasha stood in her new office on the 40th floor of a downtown high-rise. REIT Technology Consulting was no longer a side business. Thanks to the venture capital funding, a $5 million investment, she'd expanded into a full-scale company with 12 employees, a dedicated office space, and clients across 3 countries. She'd left her CTO position at Innovate Tech on excellent terms, with Robert Chin personally calling to congratulate her on her entrepreneurial venture. You're going to change the industry, he'd said. And when you decide to go public, call me first. I want to invest. Now, looking out at the city skyline from her corner office, Natasha felt the full weight of what she'd built. Her consulting firm specialized in cybersecurity for small and medium-sized businesses, making high-level protection accessible to companies that couldn't afford massive IT departments. Her team was diverse, talented, and passionate about the work. Code Forward had expanded too. With additional funding and support, they now served 5 community colleges and had graduated over 200 students into tech careers. Natasha personally mentored 10 students each semester, and watching them succeed gave her more satisfaction than any paycheck. Her personal life had transformed as well. She'd started dating someone she'd met at a tech conference 3 months ago, a software engineer named Aaron who worked for a nonprofit developing educational technology. He was kind, funny, genuinely interested in her work, and secure enough in himself to celebrate her success without feeling threatened by it. Their relationship was still new and Natasha was taking it slow. She wasn't in a rush to get serious or make commitments. But she enjoyed his company, appreciated how he listened when she talked, and liked that he valued her for who she actually was. No pressure, Aaron had said on their 3rd date. I just want to spend time with someone I admire and enjoy. Whatever this becomes, I'm good with it. That lack of pressure was refreshing. No games, no manipulation, no attempts to make her feel small so he could feel big. Just two people getting to know each other honestly. Her finances were stronger than ever. Between her business income, investments, and the equity she'd retained from Innovate Tech, her net worth had crossed $3 million. She'd bought 2 investment properties, established a robust retirement fund, and still had money left over to travel and enjoy life. She'd been to Spain, Morocco, and Thailand in the past 6 months. She'd taken cooking classes, learned pottery, joined a professional women's networking group, and reconnected with old friends she'd lost touch with during her marriage to Brandon. Her parents visited often, staying in her guest bedroom and marveling at everything she'd accomplished. "I always knew you were special," her mother said. "But seeing you like this, confident, successful, happy, it's more than I ever imagined." As for Brandon, Natasha heard through the grapevine that he'd moved to a different city, taken a lower-level sales job, and was living in a shared apartment with 2 roommates. Apparently, he'd finally stopped trying to contact her, accepting that she was never going to respond. She didn't wish him ill. She just didn't think about him at all. One afternoon, Tasha, the young student from Code Forward, came to Natasha's office for their mentoring session. "I got the job offer," Tasha said, her eyes shining with excitement. "Junior developer position at a startup. They're offering $50,000 to start, plus benefits. Ms. Reed, a year ago I was working retail and thinking I'd never make it in tech. Now I'm actually doing it." Natasha hugged her. "You did this. You put in the work, learned the skills, and earned this opportunity. I'm so proud of you." "I wouldn't have believed I could without you," Tasha said. "You showed me that someone like me could succeed in this industry. That I didn't have to shrink myself or hide who I was. That mattered more than any technical knowledge you taught me." After Tasha left, Natasha sat at her desk and thought about how far she'd come. 2 years ago, she'd been hiding her entire career from her husband, living a double life, protecting herself from someone who should have been her partner. Now she was living authentically, building businesses, mentoring others, and creating the exact life she wanted. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Reed, you have a call from that reporter at Business Week. They want to feature you in their Entrepreneurs to Watch issue." "Tell them I'm interested," Natasha said. "Schedule the interview for next week." That evening, Natasha met Angela and a few other friends for dinner at an upscale restaurant. They were celebrating Angela's promotion to partner at her law firm. "To powerful women," Angela toasted, raising her glass. "To powerful women," they all echoed. On impulse she went inside and bought it. Not because she needed it, not because someone was buying it for her, but simply because she wanted it and she could afford it. The saleswoman wrapped it carefully. "Special occasion?" "Just because," Natasha said, smiling. Back in her penthouse, Natasha put on the necklace and looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a successful businesswoman, a mentor, a leader, a person who'd overcome challenges and built something meaningful. She saw herself clearly for the first time in years. Her phone buzzed with a text from Aaron. "Hope you had a good day." No pressure to respond, just wanted to say I'm thinking about you. Natasha smiled and texted back, "Great day. Want to have dinner this weekend?" "Definitely." She set her phone down and walked to her windows, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Brandon was probably still struggling, still regretting, still living with the consequences of his choices. But that wasn't her concern anymore. She'd moved beyond him, beyond that chapter of her life, beyond the person she'd been when she thought she had to hide her success to keep the peace. She'd learned the most important lesson of her life. You can't build a real relationship with someone who refuses to see you. You can't make someone value you if they're determined to diminish you. The only person who can truly save you is yourself. And she'd saved herself. Natasha had walked away from a marriage that was killing her spirit, protected her assets, built an empire, and created a life that honored her worth. She'd gotten her revenge not through cruelty or retaliation, but through success. Through living well. Through becoming exactly who she was always meant to be. And standing there in her beautiful home, wearing a necklace she'd bought herself, looking forward to dinner with someone who actually respected her, Natasha realized something profound. This wasn't just a happy ending. This was a powerful beginning.